Starting off number 10 now, we have The Watcher. This is a very disturbing story from 2015 that will scare anyone who fears being watched by someone you can't see. And that's pretty much everyone though. A New Jersey family were terrorized after receiving 3 letters from someone who said they were watching the house. This watcher said they were put in charge of watching and waiting for its second coming. Another letter referenced the family's children, saying, "I am pleased to know your names now and the name of the young blood you have brought to me." Another letter simply asked, "Have they found out what's in the walls yet?" No thank you. The family filed a lawsuit against the previous owners of the house, who they claimed failed to inform them about the watcher before the sale, despite being aware of this individual. The family tried to sell their $1 million home but found that rumors had spread of the watcher and nobody wanted anything to do with it. In the end, they applied for a permit to tear down the house and replace it with 2 new ones. I'm not sure if the watcher would be too happy with that. Moving on to number 9 now, we have the reality show killer. That's the nickname that was given to Rodney Alcala, a serial killer estimated to have murdered upwards of 130 victims. He earned his nickname because of his 1978 appearance on the Dating Gamer TV show. Prosecutors said that Alcala toyed with his victims, strangling them until they passed out, waiting until they revived, and then repeating the process. Over the years, it's thought he took more than 1,000 sexually explicit photos of women and teenage boys, at least one of whom he murdered. On this dating show, he was paired up with a woman to go on a date after the show, but luckily she never went on the date because she got strange vibes from him. Sometimes you really should just trust your instincts about a person. She was very right. Next up at number 8 now, we have The Toxic Lady. This is the bizarre story of Gloria Ramirez, an elderly woman from California. On February 19th, 1994, she was rushed to hospital with a rapid heartbeat and a drop in blood pressure. Upon arrival, she could hardly breathe and was answering questions in incoherent sentences. Doctors knew that she had late-stage cervical cancer, but these symptoms didn't seem to make sense for the 31-year-old. No drugs seemed to stabilize her. Nurses noticed a strange, oily sheen over her body. Took a blood sample. Her blood smelled like ammonia, and there were manila-colored particles floating around in the blood. Then it got really strange. Nurses started fainting around her. One of them woke up and found that she couldn't move her arms or legs. 6 people were unable to treat Gloria because they were becoming nauseous, fainting, or experiencing this temporary paralysis. Gloria died that night. A special team in hazmat suits found nothing to suggest why people were being affected by her body in this way. The official explanation for her cause of death was kidney failure brought on by late-stage cervical cancer. The explanation for the staff fainting was given as mass hysteria. Many people didn't buy these explanations though, and feel that there are some very creepy unexplained factors involved with the story of the Toxic Lady. Next up at number 7 now, we have The Spooky House. This one comes from 2006. 2 girls from Worthington, Ohio decided to visit a local home known simply as the Spooky House. It was run down, covered in overgrowth, and situated right over the road from a cemetery. You'll notice I didn't say it was abandoned though. That's what the girls thought, but they were very wrong. 41-year-old Alan S. Davis lived there with his elderly mother that he was caring for. Now he was a recluse who had thwarted off intruders before. He had a rifle as protection, and when he heard the girls coming outside, he fired a few warning shots because that usually worked. This time though, one of the shots struck 17-year-old Rachel in the head. Somehow Rachel survived. The story spread everywhere. Some people were outraged and thought Alan was mentally ill. Others said he was well within his rights to protect his own property. He was sentenced to 19 years in prison, and the girl luckily made a full recovery. What do you guys think of this story? Can you even believe it happened? We've got a lot more scary true stories to come though. Moving on to number 6 now, we have Mercy Brown the Vampire. This story comes from New England in the late 1800s. People back then believed that members of the public were dying from consumption. We now know it to be tuberculosis. At the time, its cause was unknown, so there was a lot of mysticism around it. It was thought that the first infected member of a family was draining the life force from their living relatives, functioning as a sort of living dead type character. Those who died from consumption were exhumed from their grave and examined. If their body seemed too fresh, they were deemed to be vampires who were draining the life force of the living. Mercy Brown was a girl who was the first of her family to die. Her family didn't believe in consumption and did not want her body exhumed. The villagers insisted though, scared that they would have their life energy drained next. When they went to dig up her body, they found signs of fresh blood. The body had also turned over by itself in the grave. The villagers panicked and burned her corpse. They then took the ashes from burning her heart and mixed that with water. They then took Mercy's brother, who was suffering from consumption, and made him drink the ash water. He died 2 months later. A gruesome end to a very creepy story. Next up at number 5 now, we have the Cowchilla school bus kidnapping. When parents put their kids on a school bus, they expect it to be a safe place. That's what the parents in this story thought so too. In 1976, 26 children were heading home from their second to last day of a summer school in Coachella, California. They were all aged from 5 to 14, returning from a field trip to a swimming pool. On the way, the driver stopped to see if a car that had broken down on the road needed any help. Suddenly, 3 masked men stormed onto the bus with guns. They drove the children and bus driver around for 11 hours before eventually stopping at a quarry. They then loaded them into a buried van with a little bit of food, water, and some mattresses. The kidnappers went off to make their ransom demands, but the phone lines were too full from media calls and families looking for their children. In that time, the bus driver stacked up the mattresses, allowing them to climb up to the top of the quarry and escape. Amazingly, all of them were fine and lived to tell this terrifying tale. Moving on to number 4 now, we have Open Water. That's the name of a 2003 horror movie, but not everyone knows it was actually based on a true story. In 1998, Louisiana couple Tom and Eileen Lonergan went on vacation to Australia after completing a 2-year tour of duty with the Peace Corps. They went for a scuba dive through the Great Barrier Reef. They joined 18 other divers at the St. Crispin's Reef. After a while there, the time came to return to the surface. The diving instructor counted everyone and then they returned to the boat. Somehow though, he miscounted. As the boat left, Tom and Eileen were still underwater, just in the ocean. Nobody even realized they were missing until their belongings were found on the boat 2 days later. Then, a 3-day search began. Eventually, they found a diver's slate inscribed with a message. It read, Monday, January 26, 1998, 8 a.m. To anyone who can help us, we have been abandoned on Agincourt Reef by MV Outer Edge 25, January 98, 3 p.m. Please help to rescue us before we die. Help. That message was all that was found though. It's thought they were actually eaten by sharks in the open water. Their story inspired a horror movie, but perhaps the original is an even scarier tale. Moving on to number 3 now, we have the Russian grave robber. In 2012, a suspected grave robber in Russia was said by police to have made 29 life-size dolls from mummified female corpses. Local historian and cemetery explorer Anatoly Moskvin was arrested by police who were investigating the grave desecrations that had been going on in the area. In his house, they found brightly dressed dolls, their faces and limbs covered in cloth. At the time, they couldn't determine if every doll contained human remains. They did confirm, however, that the remains belonged mainly to girls or young women and they had been dressed in clothes taken from the corpses. Police also found photographs and nameplates taken from headstones as well as instructions for making these dolls and maps of cemeteries in the region. It was almost like he was preparing a sort of manual for others to follow in his footsteps. Next up at number 2 now, we have the bandit who wouldn't give up. This is the tale of Elmer McCurdy. He was a troubled man born in 1880 who had a love for nitroglycerin, a very explosive chemical. He would use it to break into people's homes and steal from them. He even used to rob trains. One day though, his dangerous obsession caught up with him. In 1911, he and 2 friends tried to rob a train carrying $400,000. Men discovered it was actually just a passenger train though. They only got $46 out of the people on board and 2 bottles of whiskey. The police were on their way, so Elmer holed up in a barn with the whiskey. He was ill and quite drunk when police showed up to claim the $2,000 reward on his head, and he ended up being shot and killed. Now it gets weird though. His body was taken to a funeral home where the owner embalmed it with a preservative that kept his features intact. Months went by and the embalmer received no payment from Elmer's family for his work, so he put the body on display to try and make back his costs. 5 years later, 2 men claiming to be Elmer's brothers showed up. The embalmer handed over the body to them. When Louis died, the body was placed in storage. The body didn't crop up in the history records again until the 1960s and 70s. At one point it was left hanging inside an amusement park. Can you even imagine seeing that? The body was rediscovered by a film crew in 1976, and the following year he was buried, 66 years after he died. And finally, number 1 now, we have the Porthole murder. This is a story of English actress Eileen Gibson. In 1947, the 21-year-old was on board the Durban Castle, a ship heading to England from South Africa. She had recently appeared in a production of the play Golden Boy. Tragically, she never made it home. When the ship was 90 miles off the coast of Portuguese Guinea, the young actress was pushed through a porthole into the ocean after being sexually assaulted by James Cam, the ship's steward. He did not deny this act to the investigators. During the investigations, several women came forward to say how Cam had sexually attacked them on 2 previous voyages of the same ship. He was sentenced to death but managed to get life in prison due to a loophole. After being paroled, he went on to assault 4 more females, including a 13-year-old girl. He was then put in prison for life. He was released in 1978 and died a year later. Well guys, I hope that was worth waiting almost 2 years for. If it wasn't, then perhaps I can do a part 3 a lot sooner, maybe in like 2 weeks if I feel like the time is right. If it doesn't, well, I'll see you in part 3 in about 2 years.
Coming in at number 10, we have the Judas Cradle. If there's anything that the Middle Ages was advanced in, it was how to inflict inflict horrible pain on a person. Suffering and fear were great tools to govern people back then, and anyone in power back then would have wielded it to make sure that everyone was under their control. One of the ways that they were able to do this was through the Judas cradle, a horrible device that was shaped like a pyramid. It would be placed under the bum of whoever was unfortunate enough to be placed upon it. It would be raised into the air, and then weights would be tied to the feet of the person to pull them down onto the pyramid. So as you can imagine, this sharp wooden pyramid would go up your butt. This would slowly stretch you from the bottom until you ripped open. This process would be slow and painful. Just the sight of this thing would strike fear into your heart. But if you were one of the people in medieval Europe who was in charge of administering this punishment, you would have bathed in their fear. Bringing them into the horrible room with the Judas cradle would have enlightened them to the great darkness. And guys, make sure you hit that like button. Coming in at number 9, we have eating slugs. I mean, there wasn't a ton of food around, so sometimes you had to make do with what you had. But the scary thing about eating slugs is that it wasn't something you would do even if you had plenty of grub to go around. See, there was a discovery made back in the Dark Ages. It was that slugs could eat a plant known as wolfsbane. For those of you who don't know, wolfsbane has a powerful toxin in it known as aconite. This will give you a pretty slow and painful death, and it used to be used all the time. But someone saw that there was a certain species of slug that loved to munch down on wolfsbane. Now this would mean one of two things. Either the slugs were packed full of aconite and would kill you if you ingested them, or this would mean that these slugs have some sort of immunity that would help them break down the poison. So an experiment was done and a probably disgusting dish was made called slug soup. After eating the soup, it was revealed that the body would have an immunity to aconite. I would have hated to be the person who was the test subject for this experiment. First, you would have to eat a slug, and then you would have to get poisoned, hoping that your last meal would save your life, and if it didn't, the last thing you would have ever eaten would have been a slug. Okay, coming in at number 8, we have little sperm people. Okay, this one isn't really scary because of how horrible it is, but it's more of how stupid people used to be, and this one is kind of funny. So back when we knew very little about our reproductive organs, it was believed that there was already a baby in sperm. That a little baby lived in your sperm, and when you made hanky-panky with the lady, you sent it inside her body where the baby would grow until it was ready to come out. There were even old drawings of babies inside sperm. The funny thing is they did get the shape of sperm right. Maybe we just know in our hearts that sperm is a little raindrop shape. Coming in at number 7, we have marriage. When we meet someone now, we fall in love, and that will probably lead to marriage, or you'll just have a thing where you meet up every other weekend until you both fade to dust. But back in the Dark Ages, there wasn't the same kind of love. Actually, people rarely had a say in who they got to marry. This would happen when you were quite young, and you would be married off to strengthen your family. If you fell in love with someone who was not from much money, but your family was quite wealthy, then you better believe your parents wouldn't let you marry them. Why do you think there are so many stories written about forbidden love in this way? It's a little scary to think that you would have such little say over who you get to be with for the rest of your life. And back then, if you got caught cheating, it would probably lead to jail time. Coming in at number 6, we have no one breaks the law. If you broke the law back in the day, just like now, you would go to court. You might have to sit in a dungeon for an extended period of time before you were seen in court, but there was still some sort of system to give out justice. But one of the strangest parts about this was that humans were not the only ones who had to follow the law. It was animals too. There are several records of animals being taken to court to figure out if they were guilty for a crime. Now you might think this is silly because it definitely is, but the crimes definitely weren't. More often than not, crimes were committed by pigs. And you're about to learn some stuff about the little pink food source that might make it hard to look at them the same way ever again. There are some stories of pigs killing people and then being taken to court for murder. Yeah, I could see how people would want to seek justice after one of their family members was murdered by a pig. You would be pretty sour if you came home one day and one of the people you love was gone because a pig got out of its pen and went crazy. Coming in at number 5, we have being drunk all the time. We are lucky enough to live in a time where it's a lot easier to get clean drinking water. Well, for some of the world. It's still shocking how much of the planet doesn't have access to clean drinking water. And because of this, we know that when you don't drink water that has been sterilized, you can get very sick. Well, that was definitely the situation back in the Dark Ages. Unless you found some running water coming down from a mountain, there was a good chance that the water could kill you or make you very, very ill. ill. So people turned to the next best thing, booze. See, people knew that because of the alcohol content that you wouldn't get sick from drinking beer or wine instead of water. Well, you would still get hungover, but you wouldn't get cholera. I just don't think that would be the life I would want to live. Could you imagine you spend all night drinking and then you go to bed, you wake up with a splitting headache because you're so hungover, and then the only thing you have to drink is more beer? I guess life back then was so hard you wouldn't even realize that you weren't feeling well. Coming in number 4, we have famine. If clean drinking water didn't kill you, then how hard it was to come by food might kill you after that. There were several famous famines throughout the Dark Ages that led to people getting very desperate. This usually led to people fighting with one another and areas being wiped out because there was not enough food to go around. And there was very little control over this. A slight change in the weather, too much rain or too little, the year being too hot, a fire breaking out, and in some cases bugs on the loose. Some sort of sickness or even war could lead to a poor yield and massive famine. Yeah, it was not an easy time to be alive. Coming at number 3, we have going to the doctor. There are many ways you can seek help now if you're not feeling well. You could go to a general practitioner, you could go to a naturopath. If you have some aches and pains, you could go check out an osteopath or a physiotherapist. There are so many ways you can get help now, but back in the day, going to the doctor could have been one of the worst things for your health. Doctors back then practiced some pretty primitive ways of healing people, like bloodletting, where they would drain blood from a person's body because they thought you had bad blood. Think of a lobotomy, but even more graphic. Coming in number 2, we have executions. There's a lot of ways people would take you out back then. If you were seen as guilty of a crime, there would be a good chance that you would be taken to a guillotine and have your head removed from your body. This was the fastest and easiest way to get rid of people who were given the death sentence. But believe it or not, those were the lucky ones. It would seem that people who committed crimes against the crown, like treason, would have a fate worse than death. Those people would be dragged to the streets by a horse, and that wasn't even to kill them. That was just to get them to the place where their fate would have been finalized. Once they arrived beaten and bruised, they would have some form of prolonged painful death, like a slow hanging, pulled by horses, disembowelment, or all of the above. The people would be reminded that anyone who tried to cross the royals would wish they hadn't. Again, fear was the best way to keep people in line. And coming in at the number 1 spot, we have the Black Plague, probably one of the most tragic moments in human history. The hardest correction that any disease that we know of has ever been able to hit mankind with. People being extremely unclean, rats running through the streets, a lack of proper sewage, no understanding of cleanliness. All of these things led to the Black Plague. A disease running through poop and dead bodies was able to mutate and attach itself to rats. Those rats ran through the streets endlessly to spread it, and nearly every person in Europe caught it. People would get boils all over their body, their breathing would become labored, they would have blood and pus leak out of every inch of them before they passed. Bodies were burned in mass to try and contain the sickness. People thought that it could have been an act of God, something punishing them for who knows what. Eventually, the Europeans were able to push through this, but not before it took out 1/3 of Europe. It's suspected that this wasn't the last they saw of this plague. The London Plague could have been the same strain of the sickness, as well as several other small outbreaks that happened over the next few centuries.
Starting off at number 10, we have The Exorcism. Now, I know that there are tons of exorcism movies out there, but this next one, it needs to be made into a movie for sure. Let me explain. So, a family in North London claimed that their 26-year-old son was a victim of possession. In August of 2016, they claimed that their son Kennedy Ife started to act more violent. He would say that a snake was living inside of him. He bit his father and he threatened to harm himself. This is when they restrained him to his bed. They then proceeded to conduct an exorcism on Kennedy. The family was very convinced that a demon was inside of Kennedy, and that's what Kennedy referred to as the snake in his body. They left Kennedy strapped to the bed for 3 days without any medical attention. For those 3 days, they would just pray continuously. However, this sadly didn't work. He ended up developing breathing issues and passed away. When police arrived, they found that the family had tried to resurrect Kennedy from the dead. All 7 members of the Ives family were convicted of manslaughter and false imprisonment. However, they were all cleared of charges in March of 2019. So, was Kennedy really possessed, or did the family just make that up? Because then they also tried to resurrect him, which I mean, it's not typically a normal thing to do. But imagine that as a movie. I'd watch it. It's a pretty interesting story for me. Also, if he was possessed, where did the demon go? Like, who's its new host? Because if a host dies, it doesn't necessarily mean that the demon will too. Maybe that could be explored in the movie adaptation. Moving on, at number 9 we have Rig 12. Now this next story comes from the perspective of a paramedic who was an ambulance driver. It's from the Reddit user Zerbo. Well, they have stated that a lot of paramedics have had a spooky encounter with a haunted ambulance. Maybe it's from somebody who passed away in the back. They don't know. But it's always in the ambulance known as Rig 12. So it was 3 AM, which, bad start already, that's the witching hour. Anyways, him and his partner were both waiting in their ambulance in a small community. That's when they heard a man say, "Oh my god, am I dying?" Then they heard heavy breathing. After that, they heard the oxygen bottle hiss, as if air was being seeped out to help him with his heavy breathing. They thought for sure somebody was in the back of the ambulance. But when they went to investigate, there was nothing there. The oxygen bottle wasn't even touched. Okay, so like a film about a haunted ambulance sounds kinda lame, but imagine a film about the patients that died in the vehicle that keep reliving their deaths and haunting the paramedics. Like, come on, it's not a bad idea. Maybe it's not Oscar worthy, but there's definitely some potential with this concept. In our 8th spot we have Stalker Mom. Now this story is all about a mom named Karen and her stalking store managers. It would make a pretty good comedy movie. This story was posted from the Reddit user LazyDaisy6702. In September of 2018, when this Reddit user was 16 years old, she went to a new high school and didn't have any friends in the area. That's when she was introduced to a woman named Kat. Now Kat was 27 years old and they still became good and fast friends despite the age difference. They would see each other fairly often and just hang out. Then it got to a point where Kat would want her to stay over 2 or more times a week. She would call her every other day and sometimes even call 13 times a day. Kat also gave her a necklace saying "I love you to the moon and back" and had a heart attached that said daughter. So she would joke saying that she was like her adopted mom. Then it started getting more darker. At one point this Reddit user and Kat weren't seeing each other that often. As a result, Kat had a breakdown and tried to kill her other friend. Kat then blamed this user for her own actions. Kat was becoming way too obsessed with her. She even went to her boyfriend and said, "You're stealing her away from me." Thankfully, this girl blocked her and they've never had an issue since. Now this story sounds a lot like the movie The Roommate, but I think that the same director should make a sequel and have it about Kat, and maybe how she likes to befriend younger girls. Maybe she can't have kids of her own, so she likes to play pretend with other girls. Next up at number 7 we have The Watcher. Imagine buying $1 million home only to find out that it was being stalked by a mystery man. Because that's what happened to the next family. They bought a $1.3 million home and claimed it was their perfect dream home. Minus the creepy stalker part. Now, while living at this home, they received several letters from someone who claimed to be watching the home. Some things that the Watcher said in the letters were, "This home has been the subject of my family for decades." Now, I'm personally gonna try and decipher this as we go. So, Detective Lindsay on the case. So, I believe this means that his family has some weird tradition of watching over this house, like observing the families and such. "I have been put in charge of watching and waiting for its second coming." I don't know what that means. I don't think he means it in like a biblical way. And then another letter referred to the new owner's children and asked, have they found out what's in the walls yet? And they never did tear open the walls. I'm curious to know what's in them. Come on people, do some investigating. Anyways, this family ended up moving out of this home and the previous owners admitted that they too were being watched. I could honestly see this being made into a really good thriller mystery. I'm personally already invested in this case. I wish I knew why they were watching this house in particular. Let me know your theories in the comments below. Moving on, at number 6 we have The Attic. This next story is from the Reddit user Digsdaws. He claims that his 1-bedroom apartment in Melbourne is haunted. It first started when he came home one day and found the wooden plank that was patching a hole in the ceiling on the ground snapped in two. Above the hole led to a small attic space. Now he claimed that the plank was an inch thick, so it would be hard to break without a decent amount of force applied to it. He thought that maybe someone was in his attic, but that wasn't the case. He called the tenant and she explained that the other 2 renters experienced the same thing. The board was then replaced. A month later, he woke up to a sound of someone being dragged along the floor of the attic. When he went to investigate, he found that the plank was broken in 2 again. He also heard children's voices whispering and heard them say, "It's your turn," over and over again. He was so freaked out that he just went downstairs and he watched some TV. That was until a fuse blew and then his bird started going crazy. He claims that it sounded like his bird was screaming. In the morning, his bird wasn't in his cage. He found him half drowned in the toilet. Thankfully, the bird survived, so don't worry. But when he talked to the landlord about this, she said, "Wow, you heard the whispering too?" Okay, I think landlords need to include that in their listing, like 2-bedroom apartment, nice kitchen, slightly haunted. Like, come on. So I want to know what happened in that attic space. Clearly something more sinister happened there before he moved in, and I think that's what the movie could focus on. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with Hotel Cecil. This hotel is just super cursed. Tons of deaths have occurred in this hotel and it's haunted as a result. So the Hotel Cecil is located in downtown Los Angeles. I suggest not staying there if you are ever visiting. So the first recorded death was in 1931 and it was a suicide. Then all throughout the 30s, 40s, and 60s, there were also similar cases of suicide. They believed that if you stayed at this hotel, then you may be compelled to harm yourself. Then in 1964, a tenant was brutally murdered and the case is still unsolved. Then you have the serial killer Richard Ramirez, who stayed at this hotel. And finally you have Eliza Lamb. We've talked about her a bunch, but she's the Canadian woman who was found dead in the hotel's water tank and no one knows why or how she got there. So yeah, this hotel and its gruesome past would form a great movie premise. Moving on to number 4, we have the case of Dorothy Jane Scott. This is a real unsolved case of the missing woman named Dorothy Jane Scott. Now before Dorothy disappeared, she would receive phone calls from a mysterious caller. The caller would say things like, "When I get you alone, I will cut you up into bits so no one will ever find you." Other times, the caller would profess his love to her. Now, Dorothy did say that she recognized the man's voice but just couldn't identify who it was. In May of 1980, Dorothy was kidnapped and never seen again. So that night she was at a work meeting. One of her colleagues started to become sick, so she offered to take him to the hospital. When he was released, Dorothy went to her car to bring it to the front of the hospital. The last thing her colleague saw was her car speeding away. They don't know who was driving it. Later, Dorothy's family started to receive phone calls asking if they were related to her, and it would end by saying, "I've got her." They've never found Dorothy or any clues to who this caller may be. Yeah, so they don't know if Dorothy is alive or just being held captive by someone who is obsessed with her. Up next at number 3, we have the case of the men in the lead masks. This next case is so fascinating and mysterious, I actually love it. So in 1966 in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, 2 electronics repairmen were found dead. What was strange about this is that they were both found wearing business suits, waterproof coats, and lead eye masks. You know, what people wear when they're going to be exposed to radiation. But then why did they only have the eyepieces and not the full mask? I guess that's part of the mystery. Anyways, with them there was a notebook that read, 4:30 p.m. be at determined place. 6:30 p.m. swallow capsules, wait for mask signal. Now there are a bunch of theories about this case. Some hypothesize that they had a plot with a nuclear reactor or were part of a doomsday cult. But the most common theory was that they were trying to contact UFOs. In fact, the area that they were in had been getting a lot of reports of UFO sightings. Now what frustrates me about this case is that there were no toxicology reports done. So we don't even know what capsules they took or if they died from that or something else. Either way, there needs to be a movie done on this. Maybe they were successful and ended up contacting aliens, and they were the ones who killed them after they saw too much. Who knows? Coming in at number 2, we have my own scary story. Now, I get a lot of comments asking me if I believe in ghosts, and honestly, I don't know what to believe. I've only experienced little tiny things that I end up debunking, partially to make me, be able to sleep at night. Alright, so my story. When I was younger, I was a leader for an arts camp. Now this camp took place in an old house. It was a historic site and it was used for camps and other activities. But the camp coordinator always said how it was haunted. He claimed that it was once owned by a man. This man ended up faking a robbery in order to get insurance money. He even went as far as to shoot himself in his own leg to make the scene look more realistic. Sadly, he ended up bleeding to death before the cops arrived. Now, people have seen his apparition all throughout the building. There have even been reports of the alarm system being triggered, but when police arrived, no one is there. This has happened several times, and police have even seen this man's face at the window. Now, when I was a leader there, I would deliberately avoid the basement because that was the most haunted space. In the corner where he passed away, it was much warmer than the rest of the basement. Also, the lights down there were motion activated and there were times when they would just turn on by themselves. I personally would feel super uneasy going down to that basement. In fact, there was one time where a group of us were down there filming a video, and all of a sudden, 2 of the staff just felt something at the exact same time and ran upstairs crying. And lastly, this is the freakiest thing of all. In one of the rooms in the basement, the camp coordinator said that the ghost likes to stay in there. It's a room behind a thick, heavy locked door. When he opened it, there was just a single chair in the middle of the room. This is the spot that he likes to sit. You could knock over that chair or move it and it would just always end up in the same spot. Now, when I saw that chair, I felt like he was sitting right there watching us. Like, it was a really weird feeling, I just knew he was there. So yeah, a haunted camp, a man who accidentally killed himself to try and take his insurance money, all good basis for a movie plot. Starting off this countdown, we have the ending. Posted on Reddit by the user Drake Berserker, he decided to go randonauting and set his intention to an ending. I can tell you right there that that is not a smart move. Why on earth would you choose that? Like, the app could have led you to your death and ended you. Anyways, it actually brought him to a cemetery. And the exact point he was brought to was a freshly dug hole in the ground. That's so creepy. He's just lucky that he didn't end up buried in that hole. In our 9th spot, we have something creepy. So Reddit user RickyRoma18 decided to set his intention as something creepy. And with this app, one thing that I have learned is if you ask, you shall receive. I should mention that earlier in the day, Ricky and his friend were joking around, saying that if they set the intention to war, that they would end up getting blown up by a mine. Well, the app brought them right to a memorial plaque. The plaque read, Demeanor Salvatore Agostini died by a mine in 2404-1945. Yeah, they definitely got something creepy. I mean, what are the odds that they were talking about that, and then next thing you know, they're brought to that specific point? It's so freaky and weird. In our 8th spot, we have the abandoned. So Reddit user Nova Melody decided to fool around on the app with his friends. They put the word abandoned as their intention and set off. They were brought to a field surrounded by trees that had a house, a couple of sheds, and a barn. But all of them were destroyed and had the words "Stay Out" spray painted on them. They were going to enter one of the sheds but heard low moaning voices coming from inside, so they fled. But I guess the app really did bring them to an abandoned place, so you got what you asked for. Coming in at number 7, we have the figure. Posted on Reddit by the user Payish23, they shared their Randonautica horror story, where he witnessed something ghostly. So he never shared what his intention was, but the app led him and his friends down a dark dirt road to a dead end. When they reached the dead end, they got out of the car to explore. The guy was taking photos of his surroundings when they found a dead cat in the middle of the road. Then they started to hear weird noises in the distance, so they got back in the car and drove home. When he was home, he decided to look at the photos he took. And that's when he saw a figure standing in the background of one of the photos. Yeah, that's a no for me. Making our way down the list, number 6, we have the stalker. The thing with this app is that even if you don't set your intention to anything bad, something scary can still happen. Take this story for example. One user claimed that she and her friend decided to set their intention as friendship. Aw, like that's so cute. But when they arrived at the destination, they found a van waiting there for them. They left immediately, but the van ended up following them. They ended up being chased by the van until they eventually lost them. But what's freaky is that there are tons of other stories where users claim that some sites have people there waiting for them, or that a car has also followed them. So it's kind of like a common thing that has happened to others. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the animals. So Reddit user Help I Think I'm Emo decided to set his intention as to find something spooky. And boy did he get that and more. So the app took him to a forest. When he started getting close to the point, he started to feel very uneasy, but he kept going. The app ended up taking him to a creek in the forest. That's when he noticed it. across the creek was a pile of dead animals. That's where the app was telling him to go. Being scared, he fled. But before doing so, he saw some sort of a large figure in the distance watching him. There certainly is something off with this app. Like, too many scary things have happened. In our fourth spot, we have the stranger. I know everyone wants a good thrill every now and then, but do not put scary as your intention in the app. I'm warning you. And if you don't believe me, check out this next story. So a group of guys did this, and the app brought them along a dark dirt road to a dark field. They sat in the car waiting for something to happen, and they got what they wished for. Out of nowhere, a tall man in a white top and black jeans starts running towards the car. He had blood dripping from his nose. Thankfully, the group made it back home safe and sound. And I feel bad if that man just needed help or something and wasn't evil, but still pretty creepy. Coming in at number 3, we have the suitcase. If you're into randonauting and TikTok, then I'm pretty sure you have seen this video. I saw it months ago and it still disturbs me. So the TikTok user Henry went out randonauting with his friends. They set their intentions to travel and ended up at a beach. At their destination, the group found a suitcase. Which is creepy because his intention was travel and then you use a suitcase to travel. But when they opened the suitcase, the smell was overwhelming and they saw black garbage bags in it. They ended up calling the cops, and days later it was revealed that the suitcase had a dead body in it. I literally don't know what I would do if I was the one who found that. I would be traumatized for life. That's so scary. Moving on to number 2, we have the message. So Reddit user Guacamole created a post asking for help analyzing the signs Randonautica has given her. So she claims that she is an 18-year-old girl in a secret relationship with a 23-year-old from Tennessee. She also adds that the relationship is online. So this girl asked the app what her boyfriend's true intentions were. The app brought her to a large body of water and a bunch of rocks. She figured she just didn't do it right, so she tried it again with the same intention. But the second time, the app brought her to a park next to a bunch of water. Then the third time, the app brought her to another body of water. I know you're thinking what I'm thinking. Then she changed it up and asked if her boyfriend was going to hurt her. And the app brought her to an apartment building. The name of the building was Bristol, the same city where her boyfriend lives. Okay girl, you want some advice? Your online boyfriend is going to kill you and then discard of your body in a lake or something. Seriously, it's too weird. Or maybe he just wants to go swimming with you. But chances are he's got something sinister planned. Especially if it's online, you don't know who he is. He could be a catfish and then actually be a serial killer. And in our number 1 spot, we have the dangerous hobby. Born King 2007 posted on Reddit warning everyone how dangerous randonauting is and how it nearly destroyed his life. So story goes that he kept witnessing scary things while going out on adventures. One time he witnessed a gang fight, another time he saw an old man fall into a ditch. But regardless, he kept going out multiple times for 2 months. That's when bad things started to happen to him. A tree fell from his front lawn and crushed his brand new truck. Days later, his cat went missing and was found dead floating in his neighbor's pool. He also got stung by 14 wasps, and someone broke into his home. Now he believes that somehow he has disturbed the matrix and has become an attractor or void point.
This one honestly gave me chills. So user Mike and Ray captioned the video, "This just happened in Aurora, Colorado." And then added text on the video saying to not go randonauting. And the video starts with her crying, saying not to use the app. Then she says how she set her intention to be death, and that when she was driving really close to the location, she saw a man on the side of the road laying in the gutter with a woman on top of him, kinda holding him and trying to help him out. So the user then pulled over, and when she got over to them, realized that the man had been shot, and then she had to call the cops on their behalf. And in this video, she's crying so hard at some points it's hard to understand what she's saying. So if that's any indicator of the stuff this app makes you encounter, it can be really messed up. In at number 9, man in a field.
Sky. Oh my god. I can't.
What if the
Shows up in my rear view camera.
User at Pemaray had another really creepy experience, captioning her video, "So we tried Randonautica and this is what happened." Then showing her filming outside of her car in the pitch black, in some sort of field it looks like. And you can see in the distance there's a man walking towards them completely alone. And some of you guys might be thinking that this could have just been the man's property and he was trying to see who was trespassing or something, which could be true, but it's also just really creepy that he was alone in the field in the pitch black when literally nothing else was around. And you can see the girls quickly leaving while still showing him walking towards them. In at number 8, creepy shoe. User Merc Garcia captioned the video, "You won't believe what we found." And I honestly didn't believe it until I saw it for myself. The video starts with the user showing that they have arrived at the destination and it looks like a ghost town because no one else is really around. Then it looks like they go into some sort of construction site because there are just piles of sand all around them. Then they approach this one pile and as they're walking up, you can see that there's a shoe sticking out of the pile of sand. So one of them goes up to the pile and starts hitting the shoe with a stick. I assume it's to see if it's just like a random lost shoe or to see if the shoe is attached to anything. And it ends with the woman hitting the shoe multiple times, and when it doesn't move and the dirt starts to fall, she suddenly runs away, telling the other friend that she just saw a leg.
There's a leg, there's a leg, there's a leg. No, there's not, no, there's not.
And I don't know how it ended, but I hope they called the cops to report that. And at number 7, scary white van.
This location. I was like, I know where that is. It's about 5 minutes away, so I drive out there. Mind you, it's midnight, I haven't charged my phone, and I didn't tell anyone where I was going, so I'm stupid.
A user named Sour Bong Water captioned her TikTok, "Always randonaut with friends," and she describes how she decided to go to a location that was about 5 minutes away from her house, alone when it was midnight, and not tell anyone where she was going. Then saying it wasn't what she found at the location that scared her, but what happened when she got home. So she said she went to the location and it was a random field with nothing really there. Then she saw some cop cars and decided to dip. Then she decides to leave and notices that when she pulls back into her driveway, a white car pulls up right behind her, with their lights fully facing her car. Then she shows a video of herself in the car that night, freaking out about the fact that there's a random white van fully watching her. Sadly, she doesn't tell us how it all ended, but I'm assuming she recorded the TikTok the next day, so she was obviously fine. But I'm sure she was still incredibly creeped out. In at number 6, Invisible Man.
So there's that dude. Keep an eye on that red truck. Never
He's
goes.
literally right behind
You
us
guys.
now. He's right by that mailbox and he's not there.
He's not there and the truck is not there. What the f? What the f?
User Rayleigh captioned her video, "Y'all what the F," and re-uploaded a video from user Shaylin XO. And in this one, she didn't say what her intention was or give much backstory as to what happened, but what she showed was really creepy. Basically, it starts with her showing that there is a man walking pretty closely behind their car with a dog in the daytime, as well as a red truck really close behind him, which are both, pretty normal looking things. Then it gets really creepy when she shows her backup camera of the car, and in the camera you can see the mailbox that's like directly beside the man, but you can't see the man or the red car in the backup camera. And just to make sure it's not a crazy coincidence, she then turns the camera to the man once again, and you can see that he's come even closer, but he still wasn't seen on the backup camera. And I'm not really sure what that all means, but it's obviously really scary. This next one is from the user Alex Kemp, and it's captioned, "Randonautica is just one big old nope." Then in the video you can see a group of girls walking around in the daytime, saying that they wanted to try the app out to see what they'd find. Then saying that the app took them to some woods. Then when they showed up at the exact location that the app told them to, they ended up finding a skull that looked pretty old and kind of human. Then they discovered a really small one right near the other one. And to be honest, the skull looked pretty real to me, like it looked pretty worn down. So this one might be creepy, or it might actually just be the app working how it's supposed to. You can decide for yourself. But the user, it's Bree Green, shared how she was supposed to adopt a kitten that day, but her mom told her not to. Then she said she was sad for a while, but after learning about the Randonautica app, she went on it and tried to find a kitten as her intention. So the app gave her a location that was about 5 minutes away from where she lived, and she started to head out. But when she was approaching, she saw that there were gates blocking her from getting to where she needed to be. And because she didn't want to trespass, she ended up just turning around. And then the craziest thing happened. When she was turning around, there was a kitten right there running towards her. And a lot of things on this app might be BS, but that's a pretty insane coincidence if you ask me. This next one is another really creepy one. So the user Krista Ball posted a video with the caption, "Possible cult activity near my house?" And he showed him and his friends being led into a creepy field area by the app. And when they arrived, you can see all sorts of random stuff that looks like it came out of a horror movie, including tons of coffins. And when he opened up one of the coffins, it had spikes on the inside. Then there's a large wooden plank that can be rocked up and down, and it looks like an old school torture device. Then he ends saying that if the video blows up, he'll come back at night. And when he ended up coming back with a Ouija board, thankfully he didn't find any spirits, but still really creepy. This last one is pretty cool because one of the founders of the app named Conrad decided to talk about the craziest things that he's encountered while using his own app. He starts off saying that he has had a lot of stories of what he called mind-bending synchronicities, but he speaks of one where he was with a friend and the coordinates was in the middle of the lake, so they walked as closely as they could to that point, and they were talking about giant skeletons at the time. Then when they were approaching the point, they saw this random man meditating at the edge of the lake. They then asked him if he thought intentions could affect random coordinates, and the man said yes. Then they randomly asked them if they can see a rock wall across the lake, and when they say yes, he tells them that there's giant skeletons under it. And that creeped him out so much because it was exactly what they were just talking about before they encountered this random man.
This countdown we have the demons. Okay, so this has been a common fear among many users. A lot of people made posts asking questions like, I'm a religious person, can I still use this app? They believe that it goes against their religious beliefs because it's theorized that this app taps into the spiritual world. Yep, some people think that this app is somewhat satanic, and that when you set your intentions, dark spirits or demons are the ones that make it happen for you. I mean, on the app's website, they even talk about how it's meant to explore and enhance spirituality. And a lot of eerie coincidences have happened with the app. So a lot of people believe that the app is no good and is kind of like making a deal with the devil every time you use it. And our 9th spot, we have the tracker. So with this app, it brings you to a random location, or so they claim it to be random. Theory goes that they actually set this whole thing up to make your intention come true. For example, if your intention was soccer, then they would go to the location before you get there and plant, I don't know, a soccer ball there. That way when you get there, you're totally shocked, like, oh my gosh, a soccer ball, it's totally true, you know? Meanwhile, they actually just planted the item there for you to find. Or maybe the locations are not random at all. They are already predetermined with planted objects. Moving on to number 8, we have the hackers. This next theory is that people are hacking into the app and seeing what locations people are traveling to. They then go there before you and wait until you arrive. They then will either kidnap, rob, or kill you, or who knows what else. Now, this is actually a pretty creepy theory considering tons of users have made posts saying how they arrived at a location and found somebody already there waiting for them. In one case, a user said that there was a creepy van at the location, which was an abandoned area, so it's not like they had any business being there themselves, and the van ended up following them for miles until they could lose them. So if you use this app, be careful. In our 7th spot, we have the magical app. So a lot of strange coincidences have happened to users of this app. Some are fairly scary, others are actually pretty heartwarming. For example, one user's intention was love, and they got sent to a cemetery where their brother was buried. Another user asked for anything to do with their best friend who died 2 years prior. At the location, she saw a raven and it dropped a feather. Well, when her friend was alive, she told her that if she were to have a spirit animal, it would be a raven. Pretty freaky, but cool, right? So now people believe that this app uses magic to make everyone's intentions come true, which is why you have to be careful what you wish for. If your intention is death, something bad could happen. Making our way down the list at number 6, we have artificial intelligence. So this app generates a location for you using like quantum physics and a bunch of other things I don't understand. Basically, it said that random numbers are converted into coordinate locations for you. But theory goes that this isn't so random at all. In fact, the app is an advanced version of artificial intelligence, and the AI is so smart that it picks a location that it knows has something there to fulfill your intention. That's one smart AI if that's the case. Something Siri could never do. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the dark intentions. Another theory surrounding this app is that it was set up by a group of people. One of the possibilities was that it was created by the government or police to see how easy it is to control citizens, which is freaky considering most users do exactly what the app tells them to do. or that they created it to see how different people would react in different situations. An alternate theory is that it was created by a bunch of people from the dark web. They are now planning to use this app to get away with crimes. For example, sending people to a crime scene to either mess with evidence or set them up to be at fault for the crimes. In our fourth spot, we have the simulation. Another theory is that this app was created to prove to the world that we live in a simulation. So if you look at the company's Twitter account and check out the accounts they follow, it's pretty weird. They mainly follow conspiracy theorists or paranormal and alien researchers. They also follow other people that post frequently about the simulation theory and dimension jumping. Pretty freaking weird. We know what they're into now. So it's believed that this app somehow has a connection to all this. Somehow this app alters our reality. It proves we are living in a simulation and tries to break us from our predetermined destinies. Moving on to number 3, we have the Russian experiment. So it's said that this app was developed by 2 Russian scientists and their team of mystery individuals. Besides that, we really don't know who the developers are. In a post they made about the app, they said that a person who only goes by the name Comrade came upon some sort of technology, which the developers then turned into a game. So yeah, 2 Russian men teamed up with some mystery man, Comrade, to turn some weird piece of technology into a game. I have so many questions. I'm just as confused as you are. And why does this have to be such a big mystery? It's crazy. So now theory goes that we are part of some sort of Russian experiment. At least it's not the Russian sleep experiment, that's all I have to say. In our second spot, we have the glitch in the Matrix. Multiple users of the app claim that the app causes glitches in our Matrix, and that using it too often can result in negative consequences. For example, one user used this app multiple times within 2 months. That's when bad things started happening to him. One day, a tree fell from his front lawn and crushed his brand new truck. Days later, his cat went missing and was found dead floating in his neighbor's pool. He then gets stung by 14 wasps, and then someone breaks into his home. So he's convinced that by using this app so much, he disturbed the Matrix. So it's believed that this app kind of like hacks our reality and sets a new outcome for us, which goes against our already predetermined path. That's why a lot of people feel anxious when going on these adventures. It's because you are literally disturbing the Matrix. And in our number 1 spot, we have the parallel universe. This next theory states that you can use the app to travel to alternate dimensions. I know it sounds crazy, but hear me out. People have had some creepy coincidences happen to them while randonauting. Like, one girl's intention was death, and while going to the location, she found a woman holding her husband who had been shot. On a less sad note, another person set their intention as the color red, and they got brought to a garden that had one single red flower. So theory goes that this app somehow transports you to another dimension whose timeline fits with your intentions. Lots of people that have gone randonauting have claimed that their life was never the same after. Like, they noticed things around them had changed, people's mannerisms were different, as if they were in another universe. And take a look at this. Some say that you can tell if you've jumped dimensions if there's an increase in owl sightings. They call it the owl's eternity test. And guess what? The owl is the official mascot of the community. Mind blown.
Coming in at number 10, we have the ending. The randonauting people want to bring another level of enjoyment to the randonauting experience, so they do this by telling their users to think of an intention before they go on their little trip. It's something that gives the adventure a little more meaning, and sometimes people get what they were looking for in the strangest ways. Redditor Drake Berserker went out randonauting, and he stated that he wanted to find an ending. That is something very vague, but the universe knew how to take this information and give him exactly what he was looking for. There is a very nebulous way you could understand the meaning of an ending, but this is the most blunt rendition of the word. Ending up in a cemetery with a freshly dug grave is a very creepy way for the app to show you an ending. Now, is this a premonition from the universe showing you what you need to see? Or are the phones just listening to us and an AI is interpreting what you're saying and then sending you in the right direction? Coming in at number 9, we have a ritual site. I mean, I can't confirm that this is some sort of ritual site, so you get what what I mean. It looks like some sort of site where there was some sort of strange ritual that was taking place. Like there's a whole circle of sticks going on, and then there's a circle at the center of the whole thing. There's also some weird markings in the grass that seem like they're shaped like a person. If anyone out there knows what these symbols mean, please let me know in the comments below. Coming in at number 8, we have consider yourself lucky. I have no idea why someone would go out randonauting and ask for something negative. My intention would always be like money or the answer to my problems or someone telling me I look handsome. I really like that. I would always want things to make my day better, but some people out there love the taste of danger, and I guess they want to have their limbs slowly removed by a psychopath. Now this one is not spooky because of what the person saw, but it's because of what happened. The Redditor FlySensa02 went out randonauting, and their intention was to find something evil. Why would you ever want to find that? Well, when they got out of their house, they went into their car only to find this. If there has ever been a sign from the universe telling you that you are dumb and you should stay home, it's that. The evil that you were looking for. Trust me, you don't want to find it. You're better off chilling and just take a breather. Please. Coming in at number 7, we have metaphorically scary. A scary encounter can be a lot of things. It can be someone chasing you down the street with a knife trying to steal your organs to make a cannibal stew. Or it can be reality slapping you in the face and forcing you to deal with the world around you. This randonauting encounter was the latter. Someone went out into the world with the intention of finding truth, and this is what they ran into. Okay, that is very dark. It's an American flag over a crumbling foundation and some random trash that has been thrown about. With everything that has been going on in the US, with the constant chaos that has been sweeping all over the news, whether it's secret police being sent into Portland to arrest protesters and taking them to unknown locations, or the coronavirus reaching numbers of all-time highs day after day, or the president doing a bean shoot in the midst of the insanity, things can feel a little hopeless at times. Coming in at number 6, we have Come Inside. The next point was a story I snagged off of Reddit. Our writer says they were randonauting in Montana and it led them into a forest. It was almost sundown, so they wanted to make this as quick as possible. Nothing like following your phone into the woods to try and find a random location you've never been to before, right before the sun goes down. It seems like many safe decisions were made that day. Well, they continued on into the woods until they came onto a path. There were some signs along the path directing them down the right direction. This seemed a little bit comforting because at least it showed that some people had been here before. Well, when they eventually got to the end of the path, they found a run-down cabin that had a large sign on it that read, "Come inside." Yeah, that's gonna be a no for me, dog. Well, our Redditor took this as a sign that they should turn around and never come back, and that's exactly what they did. The sign was probably nothing, but it could have been the laziest murder trap ever built. Coming in at number 5, we have watch out when you're in the woods. So it seems that scary murder traps aren't the only thing that are going to be waiting for you when you walk into the woods. A randonauting warning article told of some pretty horrific encounters that kids had while walking through the woods, something that's a little more threatening than an ominous sign trying to scare teens. But what about a bear encounter? Yes, apparently this happens quite often. I mean, sometimes they can be harmless, but still very intimidating. But if you are randonauting through the woods, you should be sure to bring stuff with you that can scare off predators, and don't be looking down at your phone constantly because you might end up someone else's snack, or just harassed like that girl went viral a few weeks ago when the black bear was just like poking at her. That was so freaky. Coming in at number 4, we have Don't Go Inside. Redditor YoYuke696969 decided that they wanted to have a spooky adventure, and the intention that they put onto the world was that they wanted to see something scary. Well, be careful what you wish for, kids, because sometimes you're going to get slapped right in the face. Well, metaphorically speaking, a Redditor didn't actually get slapped in the face. Well, they ended up walking down a long, dirty road, and they saw this building. Yeah, you can't get much creepier than an old rundown mansion that looks like it's going to be the location for the next Resident Evil game. Oh, and if the look of the mansion wasn't creepy enough for you, here's something a little deeper to freak you out. Apparently this mansion is still used for religious retreats. What kind of religion has never been specified, but it's safe to say that this is some sort of secret cult mansion in the middle of the woods. Yeah, I think it's time to head home and pretend you never saw this place. Coming in at number 3, we have Be Careful What You Wish For. So a TikToker goes by the handle Anna49048 wanted to manifest destruction, and she ended up in the woods looking at all of this. Yeah, that doesn't look like a good time at all. I don't know how serious this was. Like, I don't think a murderer would leave behind a sign that's labeled Chop Shop in the middle of the woods. That seems a little too obvious and kind of tacky. It's probably just some old props that were left out from a Halloween tour, but it's still creepy to come across all that stuff randomly. The video ends with her saying that the destruction got even worse when she went home home, but that kind of sounds like something you would say because it's clickbaity and it keeps people going through your videos. But guys, you will never believe how insane the next 2 points are, so you have to stay tuned in this video to see what the top 2 are. See what I did there? To keep you guys in the video. Coming in at number 2, we have chase down. Maybe here's a good idea. Don't go randonauting at night, especially when it's going to lead you into the woods. I feel like I can have so much more fun just staying at home alone, watching Netflix and binge eating something that's made with high fructose corn syrup. Well, someone who goes by the handle Tia Langley wanted a little more thrill in her life, and her and her 3 friends drove into the woods at night, and they were quickly met with some random dudes that were not happy to see them. So this is what went down in the clip. One dude approaches the car with a flashlight. Why was this dude in the forest? We will probably never know. He rushes the car, and then 2 more guys show up, and one of them punches the car. Maybe they were camping there and they were pissed off to see some people driving through their campsite, or maybe they just wanted these girls to get out of their car so they could use them as a blood sacrifice. I don't know. And coming in at the number 1 spot, we have possibly a murder site. You know, I like games that make you adventure around the world in a fun way, like Pokemon Go. Let me catch a Pikachu. I don't want to catch a knife in the neck. So the TikToker Dream X Faith went out on a randonauting trip with a couple of her friends, and they came across this. Yeah, that's gonna be a big no for me, thanks. Why was there a phone and bones out there? Who did they belong to? Was this all set up for some views? I really have no idea. But there is the possibility that they stumbled upon a place where someone got rid of a couple of bodies and all of the stuff that belonged to them. I mean, this is partly the fault of the murderer. You should do a better job at hiding bones and bodies and all that junk. God.
Starting off this countdown, we have the Crescent Hotel. In 1936, Norman G. Baker, a millionaire inventor, turned a hotel into a hospital and posed as a doctor. He claimed that he had a cure for cancer. As a result, he had numerous patients and became super wealthy. He claimed that using aluminum products caused cancer, and that the only way to cure it was through his made-up drug, which was a mixture of alcohol, glycerin, carbolic acid mixed with tea from watermelon seeds, brown corn silk, and clover leaves. As a result, many of the people he treated ended up dying. Now, people don't know what his intentions were. Did he truly believe that he had a cure, or was this all just a ploy to take advantage of vulnerable people? I should also mention that he was obsessed with the color purple. As a result, he would always dress in purple, he drove a purple car, and the hospital walls were painted purple, and he even had a purple chimney. So I'm thinking, a movie about a loony doctor that tricks individuals into thinking that they have some sort of new made-up disease. Meanwhile, in reality, they are actually healthy. Maybe he slowly gives them medication or some sort of drug that's supposed to help them, but it actually makes them feel sick and gives them symptoms of this disease. Then he tricks these individuals into staying at his house, only to find out that he's experimenting on and torturing patients. $1 million idea right there. Wow. In our 9th spot, we have the text from the afterlife. This story was shared by the Reddit user named Ledger Domain. He claimed that his new partner would receive text from her deceased son. In the post, he claims that she would get a text from him at least once a week, but her son's phone was in a drawer at his sister's house. It no longer had a SIM card and it wasn't working. He also said that she would receive the text when she was feeling down. The text would say things along the lines of, "I love you, see you soon." Now, some people commented on the post saying that a text saying "see you soon" seems pretty sinister, and people thought that it may not be from her son, but a dark spirit. So, what if we had a movie about a grieving mother who thinks she's in touch with her son, but instead is being haunted by an evil spirit, posing as her son? Maybe instead this spirit gets her to do extreme tasks like harm others or herself. I think there's probably a movie out there that's similar to this concept, but it's still a good premise. Coming in at number 8, we have the boarding school ghost. In this next story, a man claims that his old boarding school in London was haunted by a young boy. When he was just 8 years old, he left his lunchbox in the lunch hall. As a result, he went back down to the now empty hall to get it, but something strange happened. The wooden door slammed shut behind him and he felt a cool breeze by his side. That's when he saw a shadow of a small boy beside him. All the boy did was point to one of the benches. The man went to the bench and it had the name Charles carved into it. So, who is Charles? In the movie, maybe he was a kid that was picked on and passed away from being hazed. Now he's back trying to get revenge. Moving on to number 7, we have the lighthouse keepers. In December of 1900, 3 lighthouse keepers in Flannan Islands vanished without a trace. After a ship arrived and no lighthouse keepers came out to greet them, the captain knew something was up. The lighthouse door was left unlocked. 2 jackets were missing, food was left uneaten, and a chair was knocked over. Weirdest part, the kitchen clock had stopped working. Not only that, but there were very strange entries in the lighthouse logs. It was written down that the principal lighthouse keeper, James, was oddly quiet, and that the other assistant, William, was crying. On December 15th, someone wrote, "A storm ended, sea calm, God is over all." But there were no reported storms in the area until December 17th. It is theorized that the staff tried to retrieve fallen ropes when a wave washed them out to sea. But why would one man not wear his coat while doing this task when it was freezing out? Also, people don't buy this theory because they are very experienced men. Other people think that they were killed or kidnapped by aliens. Another great mystery that would make a great premise for a movie. Making our way down the list of number 6, we have Room 1046. Another case that I wish I had the answers to. On January 2nd, 1935, a man that went by the name of Roland T. Owen checked into the Present Hotel in Kansas City. He was described as being 20 to 35 in age, nicely dressed with brown hair and a scar on his scalp above his ear. Bellhop noted that he only was traveling with a comb and a toothbrush. Over the course of his stay, strange incidents occurred, such as Owen locking the door from the inside and sitting in the room in complete darkness, or him being visited by a man he called Don. One time, the maid Mary Soptic went to clean his room and Owen was just sitting there in the dark. The phone rang during this time and she heard him say, and I quote, "No, Don, I don't want to eat. I am not hungry. I just had breakfast." After a moment, he repeated, "No, I am not hungry." Well, people theorize that this was his way of saying, "I can't talk right now, someone's listening." Then one day, the bellhop received a call 3 different times saying that the phone in his room was off the hook for 10 minutes. He went up 3 separate times to get the phone back on the hook. The second time, he actually entered the room where he found him laying naked on the bed. He just assumed that he was drunk, and so he put the phone back on the hook and went back downstairs. Then he received another call saying that the phone was back off the hook. This time when he entered Owen's room, he found him sitting in a puddle of blood with his head in his hands. He suffered from blunt force trauma to his head and had multiple stab wounds. Owen was still conscious when detectives arrived, and when he was asked who was in the room, he said, "No one." He died shortly after arriving to the hospital. Now, this is when it gets even more strange. It is said that Owen was injured well before the bellhop first entered the room. So why didn't Owen tell him that he was hurt? Also, his clothes were missing and some other items in the hotel like the soap and toothpaste. Also, there is no record of a Roland T. Owen, it's just made up. At his funeral, money was sent in a rolled up newspaper, and someone left a bouquet of flowers and a letter that read, "Love forever, Lucille." Now, a woman did come forward claiming that he was her son, Scott Ogletree, but we still have so many unsolved questions. Who murdered him, and why? I mean, a movie could take so many different routes with this story. Maybe he was part of the mob, or maybe the movie could focus on Owen haunting all the guests of the hotel room 1046. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the Girl Scout trip. So this one is a truly devastating and heartbreaking story. In 1977 in Oklahoma, 3 girls disappeared from their tent during a Girl Scout trip. These girls were Lori Farmer, age 8, Michelle Guzzi, age 9, and Denise Milner, age 10. In the morning, the counselor found the bodies of these 3 girls laying by a tree. 2 months prior, the counselor actually received a warning that this might happen. She was doing a training session when she found her cabin was broken into and someone ate a box of donuts and left some very disturbing notes. The first note had "kill" written repeatedly on it. The second said, "We are on a mission to kill 3 girls." The counselor just thought it was just a prank until it actually happened. After police investigation, they did arrest an escaped convict, but he was later found not guilty. After continuous investigations, police think that a woman could have been involved in the killing. Other evidence makes people think that 4 men were involved. But to this day, it still goes unsolved. In fact, the camp to this day still remains shut down. But for the movie, I'm thinking maybe a group of teens go to the camp to seek a paranormal thrill and then they end up being the next victims. Yes, it kind of sounds like Friday the 13th and Camp Crystal Lake, but this time it's grounded in truth. In our 4th spot, we have the kidnapping. So this next story is my own personal one. It's the time that I almost got kidnapped while on vacation. I swear this is 100% true. So basically when I was around 10 or so, my family went on a trip to Florida to go to Disney World. At around 8 at night, my older brother, who was 16 at the time, took me, my other older brother who was 14, my older cousin who was 11, and my younger cousin who was 8, and we all went outside to the pool for a night swim. Well, Well, while at the pool, me and my cousin made friends with this little girl. She was around the same age as me. Maybe she was like 9 or 8. And we were all having like little fun races and doing like somersaults and handstands in the pool. And then she randomly goes, "I want you to meet my dad." Okay, so I was a very cautious kid and my parents taught me really well about stranger danger. So I was pretty sketched out at that. So I was like, "Why?" She's like, "I want you to meet my dad." I said, "Okay, where is he?" All she did was point. But she pointed to an area that was surrounded by trees and it wasn't even lit up by the pool light. So I was like, "No." But she took my hand and was like, "My dad will love you." And then she just kept pointing where he was, but I couldn't see a man by the pool. So I swam away with my cousin, I told my brother, and we all just went back to the room. But as we were walking away, I saw the girl get out of the pool and start walking towards her dad, and I saw a shadow of a man by the trees in the darkness. So to this day, I am convinced that this girl was trying to lure me to her dad so that he could kidnap me. Like, why on earth would he be watching his daughter from the trees at a distance and not on the pool deck with all the other parents? So this brings me to my movie idea. A movie about a man who uses his daughter to lure other kids to him. He then kidnaps them and then convinces that he's their real dad. Coming in our third spot, we have Lizzie Borden. Hold it right there. Before you comment down below, I know that there are a couple movies already out there surrounding Lizzie Borden, I know. But I'm going to provide you with an original, even spookier concept. So for those of you who don't know, in 1892, Lizzie Borden was suspected of killing her father and stepmother with an axe. In fact, there's this like really creepy nursery rhyme that goes, Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. Creepy. But we actually don't know who killed her parents. Some believe that it was Lizzie, other believes that she possibly couldn't have done it. Other people have theorized that Lizzie Borden actually had a child. So, I would love a movie surrounding that idea. If she did have a child, how she would have to try and hide and protect the baby, and how the baby grew up knowing her mother's tragic past. I want to see a movie about that. Spot, we have the disappearance of Chris and Lizanne. This case is extremely sad, and although there are numerous theories out there, it still remains a huge mystery. On April 1st, 2014, 2 young girls named Chris Kremers and Lizanne Froon went on a hike in the Panamanian jungle. But sadly, they never made it back home. They spent 6 months planning their trip to Panama. They had planned to hike, volunteer, and teach arts and crafts to the local children. On April 1st, their dog returned to their host family's home without the girls. On April 2nd, they both missed their private walking tour. The host family alerted the authorities and an aerial search of the forest was done. Searches were conducted for weeks, but the girls were nowhere to be found. That's when their blue backpack was found along the banks of a river. In the backpack contained Lizanne's passport along with other personal belongings. Most importantly, they found their camera and cell phones. It was revealed that 77 attempts were made to call the police. The photos on the camera revealed heartbreaking evidence. It started off with the girls taking normal photos showing how excited they were on their trip. The next set of photos were taken in the dead of night on April 8th. Some were just random photos showing their surroundings. Another photo was of the back of Chris's head showing blood dripping from her temple. Other photos were just completely black. So it's theorized that they used their camera flash as a source of light. Others theorize that Lizanne was taking photos to document Chris's injuries and their location. 2 months later, a pelvic bone and a foot still inside a boot were found. Then the bones of both the women were discovered. Some say they died after getting lost in the jungle. Others theorize that they were murdered and the killer deliberately took the photos and made the phone calls to make it seem like they just got lost. Either way, I think this movie should be made from the girls' perspectives as they try and survive for days in the jungle. I could see it kind of being shot like a Blair Witch style film. And of course, you can add in the element of there being a potential murderer. So that could just make it that much more terrifying.
Starting us off at number 10 is Dan Cooper. Back in 1971, a man who went by the alias Dan Cooper hijacked a commercial plane and no one has ever been able to find him since. According to those involved, shortly after takeoff, he handed a note to a flight attendant claiming to have a his briefcase. He demanded 4 parachutes and $200,000 in $20 bills, which is the equivalent of like $1.2 million nowadays. Otherwise, he was going to kill everyone on the plane. After the flight landed in Seattle, Cooper released the 36 passengers once authorities had provided him with the money and parachutes, but but kept both pilots, one flight engineer, and flight attendants as hostages on the plane. From there, he forced them to fly to Mexico City, but somewhere over Nevada, Cooper jumped off the plane with the stolen cash. The FBI launched a massive search that is still considered one of the longest and most exhaustive investigations in FBI history. But Dan Cooper has yet to be found, and I'm sure many agents lost sleep over trying to figure out this case. Moving on to number 9, the West Mesa bone collector. Back in 2009, a woman on a leisurely walk with her dog came across something peculiar. A human bone. Little did she know, she'd stumbled upon a major crime scene. Upon her discovery, authorities became immediately involved and discovered that it was a mass grave filled with human remains. But how did they get there? A killer dubbed the West Mesa bone collector. Active between 2001 to 2005, the killer was known to target young women, usually Hispanic and almost always involved in late night services or the trade, but not exclusively, which made it hard to identify why he chose his victims. While we know practically nothing about the killer, we do know that he would take the bodies to the desert to dispose of them. After years of police investigation, the remains of 11 women were found scattered in the deserts of Albuquerque, but the exact way they died is yet to be discovered, as medical examiners and forensic experts have not been able to identify his methods, which is very unusual. Sadly, neither police or FBI have ever been able to track down who was responsible for ending these young women's lives, and I am sure the agents on the case are continually disturbed by the fact that he remains on the loose. Moving on to number 8. Glendon Scott Crawford. In 2012, Glendon Scott Crawford, who was a part of the Pointy Hat white supremacist group, conspired with a guy named Eric Fate to turn an industrial-grade X-ray radiation device into a weapon of mass destruction. The plan was to have a remote-controlled death ray he could use on Muslims in the United States, targeting mosques, community centers, and so on. So Crawford sought assistance from Chris Barker, one of the Imperial Wizards in his hate group. However, what Crawford did not know was that Barker, in an effort to handle his own felony charges, had become an informant for the FBI. This led to another FBI agent coming on the case undercover, and eventually, once there was enough evidence stacked against Crawford's plan to commit acts of he was sentenced to 30 years behind bars. Still, I can only imagine how disturbing it must have been for those undercover agents to be in the same room with such a disgusting man. Moving on to number 7, Richard Trenton Chase. Often referred to as the Vampire of Sacramento, Chase was a truly terrifying killer who took the life of 6 people in just 1 month back in 1977. Before he turned to human victims, Chase would capture animals and bring them back to his apartment to kill and disembowel. From there, he would eat them raw, sometimes mixing them with Coca-Cola in his blender. Then in 1973, Chase was forcibly admitted to an institution after being taken to emergency for trying to inject rabbit's blood into his veins. While in the facility, he was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and became known as the Vampire, as he all too often killed animals and drank their blood. But by 1976, he was deemed no longer a threat to society and released back into his mother's custody. Tragically, she began weaning him off his medication, believing he didn't really need it, and once again he slipped into old habits. But this time it wasn't birds and rabbits Chase was harming, he was breaking into homes and killing people before treating them just as he did his animals. Eventually he was put on trial for his 6 victims, and a jury ruled him guilty, rejecting the defense's attempt that he could not be tried due to insanity. Chase was sentenced to death, but ended up taking his own life while behind bars before his execution. Coming in at number 6, Daniela Green. Born in Germany, Daniela moved to the US with her family before she was hired as a contract linguist for the FBI in 2011. While working at the FBI, they made use of her bilingual skills and ended up assigning her to a German terror criminal known as Individual A at the time. Through research, Green discovered her subject was a former rap artist named Dennis Kuisbert, who had joined, that group, and over time, Green found ways to correspond with Kuisbert. However, in a shocking turn of events, their relationship turned romantic. Soon Green made secretive plans to fly out to Syria and meet him, and within hours of her arrival, the two got married. But it didn't take long before she realized what a mess she found herself in and ended up emailing an acquaintance for help. Within 5 weeks, American authorities caught up to her. Green was arrested and returned to the US, but was released after only 9 months in jail, and the FBI spun her involvement with Cuthbert as that of an unsuspecting linguist duped by a conniving criminal. Still, I can only imagine how disturbing it must have been for everyone involved, knowing that one of their own had double-crossed them and married the literal enemy they were trying to take down. Next up at number 5, Robert Hansen. Known in the media as the Butcher Baker, Hansen was an extremely sick killer who quite literally viewed his victims as prey. In his adolescence, Robert was an awkward and shy boy who had absolutely no luck with girls. These early rejections festered into a deep hatred for women, for which he later would seek revenge. As he got older, he began finding solace in archery and hunting, and would routinely spend his time perfecting his craft alone in the woods. Then in the early 1960s, he began seeking revenge, at first by committing arson on his high school property, but then soon turned to seek revenge on women specifically. By 1971, he was kidnapping and taking advantage of women, but not yet killing. He was charged and sentenced to 5 years for his crimes, but after just 6 months was released on a work program. After his release is where it really got scary. He began kidnapping women and escorts, taking them back to his apartment where he would do awful things to their bodies, before flying them out to secluded areas in the wilderness and telling them he was going to hunt them down and kill them. Tragically, an estimated 21 women lost their lives to this monster, but thankfully he was convicted and sentenced to 461 years in prison without possibility of parole. Moving on to number 4, Albert Fish. Also known as the Brooklyn Vampire, Albert Fish was a terrifying killer responsible for the death of 3 people in the mid-1920s, although according to him, it was well over 100. Fish grew up in an unstable home. Both his parents suffered from mental illness, and after his father died, he was sent to live at an orphanage. While there, he was by the other orphans, but he started to develop a rather confusing feeling towards the pain. He began to enjoy it. As Fish got older, he started seeking darker and more twisted things to feel alive, and soon that led to the kidnapping, taking advantage of, killing, and later devouring of minors. Thankfully, the monster was caught in 1935, and shockingly, he wasted no time denying his atrocities. In fact, he almost seemed proud of them. I can't, and frankly won't, go into detail about what he did, but it is some of the most disgusting stuff I have ever read about. And I can only imagine the agents on his case felt the same. Eventually, Fish was sentenced to death and died by electric chair in 1936. After his death, his lawyer refused to release his final statement, saying, quote, "I will never show it to anyone. It was the most filthy string of obscenities that I have ever read." Next up at number 3, Michael James Pratt. Currently on the FBI's top 10 most wanted, I can only imagine how disturbed the FBI was when they first became aware of this case. Between approximately 2012 to 2019, Michael Pratt, along with a few accomplices, was involved in recruiting underage girls to be a part of an adult film production company that he owned and operated. Pratt lured the girls in under Craigslist ads asking for models, and from there he promised payment in exchange for a clothed modeling gig. But sadly, this couldn't have been further from what he had planned for the victims. Beyond the obviously morally despicable stuff they were making these girls do, he would also force past victims into providing false assurance to the girls that their films would never end up online. Allegedly, some of the victims were not permitted to leave locations until the shoot was completed, others were forced to perform after declining participation, and the crew was also known to commit SA when the girls wouldn't comply. After fleeing the country in 2019, right before his trial for his crimes, he was added to the FBI list, and the search for this creep continues. Moving on to number 2, Mark Putnam. In the mid-1980s, Mark Putnam was a happy husband, father, and successful FBI agent. But after relocating to the Bureau's Pikeville office, things began to change. At this time, Carl Edwards Lockhart, a notorious bank robber, had just been let out of prison, and Putnam believed that he was back to his old ways. So he began gathering informants that could help him take down Lockhart. One of these informants was Susan Smith, addicted divorcee raising a family who needed the cash. But soon, she became more than just Putnam's informant. The two began an affair, and by 1989, Smith was allegedly pregnant. This terrified Putnam. He knew it would not only ruin his marriage, but end his career, and so he demanded a paternity test and explained he and his wife could adopt from her. This, however, led to a violent fight between them that ultimately ended with Putnam strangling Susan to death. Initially, the suspect was Susan's ex-husband, but soon Putnam was interrogated, and after failing a polygraph, he confessed to the whole thing and offered to lead the FBI to where she was. However, there are a few mysteries. Susan Smith's sister claimed that FBI agent Ron Poole, Putnam's superior, not only knew about Smith's alleged pregnancy, but also disclosed to Smith information about Putnam's illicit activities with other informants. And allegedly, medical examiners claimed that they were unable to find any trace of a fetus during an autopsy on Smith, who should have been 4 months pregnant. I mean, it's just all disturbing top to bottom. And last up in our number 1 spot, the Breonna Dennison case. Breonna Dennison was a college student home for the holidays in Reno, Nevada, when tragically one night she went missing while staying over at a friend's house. In the days following, the Reno Police Department conducted an investigation at her friend's home, where she had last been seen, and concluded she had been abducted after discovering male DNA on a doorknob and her own on a pillowcase. At this point, the FBI became involved in the search, and after investigations linked the male DNA to other open cases involving sexually violent crimes, they worried that the missing girl's fate had already been decided. And sadly, nearly a month after she had gone missing, Breonna was found dead in a ditch. That fall, after lengthy investigations, interrogations, and DNA samples, they finally found the man guilty of the crime, James Biella. And it came out that he had actually held her captive in his home for several days, harming and doing awful things to her body before he eventually killed her. And to top it off, he lived 1 block from FBI agents, 2 sheriffs, and a local police officer. So he was literally doing it all under their nose.
List at number 10, we have the author of the novel A Day in Hell. In this book, Matthew Botsford explains that after he accidentally walked into the middle of a shootout, he got shot in the head and died. He was resuscitated, but he was in a coma for 27 days afterwards. He explains a short time in hell as utter darkness that enveloped him as he was in thick black ink that poured over his eyes. He claimed that he was suspended in darkness, being blasted with hot air and having demonic eyes make their way towards him until some sort of divine entity grabbed him, telling him it wasn't his time.
Coming in number 9 is Army Dr. George Ritchie. He explains that in the 9 minutes he was dead, he was given a tour of hell by Jesus himself. I mean, what is Jesus doing in hell? Or maybe this isn't Jesus, maybe this is Jesus. Maybe this is Jesus in hell. Well, all around him he claims spirits were fighting each other to the death, kicking, biting, scratching, abuse, every single horrible act that could be imagined was taking place around him. And next up at number 8 is one aunt who died for a short time on the operating table. Well, she described the situation saying that she was lifted through the ceiling and into the sky. She ended up floating a few inches above a dirty brown, lifeless field, and across a dark void, she could see a lush green meadow. She suddenly felt something grabbing at her as if it was ripping flesh from her leg. She started withering to get out of the creature's grasp and saw her body on the operating table flailing around just before she was resurrected.
In at number 7, we have a professor who visited hell while he was unconscious prior to an emergency surgery. He says that during this time, he was being attacked by all sorts of vicious creatures, and when he tried to pray to protect himself, they only got angrier. Coming in at the number 6 slot today, we got a hospice patient who came close to death. One of his workers said that his patient had a near-death experience one day and was terrified by what he saw. He says he saw what he thought was pain and fire, leading him to what he thinks was hell. Apparently this man had no closure in his life and wasn't in touch with his family, so maybe this was a little bit of a wake-up call for him.
Halfway through, at number 5 is a Reddit user who has a very interesting interpretation of Satan.
This user claimed that he had OD'd 20 years ago. He died and saw Satan.
But what he saw wasn't what we normally envision, the devil as being, but rather he was a giant fire ant walking on lava.
Even he was confused why Satan would present himself as a fire ant, but I guess demons are gonna do what demons are gonna do.
Okay, if I'm the devil and I'm coming back as an animal, I am not coming back as one of the smallest animals ever.
I don't know, an ant that's on fire and it like crawls up your leg and gets in your shorts and stuff, maybe it goes in your urethra? That's bad.
Whoa, you took it to the next level.
I mean, that's hell. We're in hell, dude.
I'd come back as a dinosaur.
Yeah, a dinosaur would be
just a massive dinosaur, not the ones that eats only plants.
No. You want a, what, the carnivorous?
A meat eater.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what you want.
I can't remember grade 3 science. Is that what it is? Carnivorous? The meat eater.
You have carnivores, herbivores, and omnivores. Boom.
Taking number 4 slot, we have somebody who explains hell as just like Earth, but dead. What does this mean? She says that after being hit by a car, she woke up in the same place where she was hit, except the sky was reddish orange, there was no animals, and the plants were dying or they were already dead. Is this real life right now? And the world smelled like rotten meat. Okay, so technically this one was a story on the non-sleep subreddit, but in my opinion, I feel like it seems like a pretty realistic version of what hell could be.
And at number 3 is a man who was momentarily killed in a bar fight. After being stabbed with a broken bottle, this man said that entering hell felt like passing through the open mouth of a volcano or burning lake. People who he knew had died were warning him not to come there, as there was no escape. All he could do was hear their crying and wailing of the souls that were trapped down there. After he came back to life, he decided to become a pastor to save the souls from going where he was headed.
After suffering heart failure, he felt himself falling through Earth and landing just before a tall set of rusty gates, which had an aurora of being the gates of hell. Being too afraid to enter and knowing it wasn't his time, well, he managed to crawl back towards sunlight and back to life. Absolutely insane. I'm not sure if I believe it, but if it's a true story, remarkable.
And we're finishing off today's list with a Reddit user who drowned at 14.
This person claims that at the time they didn't entirely realize that they were dead.
They just felt like they were floating on the water. They said they saw somebody standing on the water who answered no when the user asked if they were God.
They told the user to keep floating, so they did. Eventually though, the cool water began heating up until it was boiling. They were paralyzed and forced to be in excruciating pain for what felt like years until the water cooled down again, only to start the process all over again.
Eventually the creature who the user spoke to earlier stopped and says, "Looks like someone's come for you, our playtime is over."
But maybe we will see each other again sometime. The user was then brought back to life by paramedics, the real life heroes. Well, there you guys have it. That was the top 10 scary stories from people who have seen hell. Maybe some of you guys have seen hell.
Yeah, what do you guys think? Do you guys believe in the afterlife? What do you guys imagine it'll look like?
I believe in the afterlife. Something's got to be going on down there in hell. I'm most likely going down rather than up. I'm not.
So?
I don't know. Probably.
I hope that the afterlife is just like a really sick water slide that you just like wait in line for, and then you like go on and you're like, that was sick, and they're like, you can get back in line if you want.
Number 10, One Dumb Diver. This first story is from Reddit user One Dumb Diver, and boy does he live up to his name. His first mistake was heading out for a 90-foot dive alone, but he was just 15 years old and thought, how bad could it be? He needed to clear his head, so he headed out on his family's boat to the reef. While floating down at 90 feet, second mistake, he was only rated for 60. He saw a 3.5 meter mako shark. Mako sharks, according to the diver, only have 2 speeds, curious and lunch mode. Guess which mode this guy was in. Divers now use electronic pulses to freak out sharks, but he was using the older method of a chainmail sleeve. They bite the metal, they think, ugh, gross, swim away. But mistake number 3, he forgot the sleeve on his bed at home. Shark bit down, there was now an open gashing wound in the water and salt was burning his flesh. Mistake number 4, he had drifted a 1/4 mile downstream from his boat. Luckily, he made it to shore, and 172 stitches, physical therapy to repair his tricep, and some crazy scars later, this deep sea diver never made the same mistakes ever again. Number 9. Funny from the outside. Okay, this one is scary and funny at the same time, and yes, it also involves sharks. Sometimes fear of the thing itself makes you do some pretty weird things to avoid it, which eventually makes the worst thing happen. Reddit user NZ Viking Rugger has to wear eye contacts, which makes wearing a mask even more of a necessity. The idea of going without them surpassed any other fears, even as a shark headed straight for her. While on a dive, a friend behind her had collided with a shark and her mask was knocked off. She couldn't stop thinking about the fact that her mask was knocked off, that even as a shark headed straight for her, she was more afraid of that. Usually sharks are more curious than anything, and usually they just shoulder bump you as they turn at the last minute, but this one wasn't. She was beelining for Viking. She kept calm though, and at the last second the shark was about to knock her mask, the diver just headbutted the shark in the nose. She may be the only person to ever headbutt a 11-foot shark because she was afraid she might lose her mask. And she's alive, so good for her. Number 8. Food poisoning. I can't think of a worse time to get food poisoning than like while scuba diving. Actually, I probably can. There's probably something worse, like I don't know, in front of like your crush or something like that, but this one is definitely up there. Reddit user someguy12 recounts the moment he had to deal with seeing yesterday's lunch on a deep sea dive. He was 14, a relatively new diver, and just hit 20 meters below the surface with his dad and brother. About 45 minutes out, a foreboding churning began in his stomach, and, well, he started to upchuck into the water. The worst part is that the fish surrounding him thought it was lunchtime. Like they were like, wow, look, sandwiches. No one was within arm's reach, so he had to keep clearing his regulator, puke, and then repeat until he was like all clear. No one noticed, and he just kept on with the rest of the dive. I am as horrified as I am impressed with his perseverance, but like, dude, go up to the surface. That's enough. Number 7, shark rescue. Being a rescue diver means you often have to put yourself at risk in order to recover people who got themselves into trouble. Keith Baugh is a rescue diver in the Bahamas, and he was on a mission to find a missing diver. He was submerged in the infamous blue hole in the Bahamas and finally caught a flash of the diver's watch on his arm. He started swimming to the bottom and began to notice that the bottom was moving. An entire school of sharks were swimming right over the body. It was breeding season and there were so many sharks he couldn't see the bottom. He found the diver though, and as quick as he could began swimming up to the surface. Thing with diving though is if you rise too quickly you could get something called the bends, aka decompression sickness. The shark started following him, and when he reached 70 feet he had to take a break to adjust, and therefore spent 8 minutes surrounded by a school of sharks with a dead body in one hand. Like how he got out of there without turning into shark food is pretty astounding. Number 6, shipwrecked. Tom Pritchard had over 1,000 dives under his belt, was known for being incredibly detail oriented and cautious. Nothing should have gone wrong, but of course something did. Just what remains a mystery. Pritchard was working on attaching a mooring line to the Andrea Doria. The Andrea Doria is a shipwreck 300 miles outside of New York. When the line was attached, the other crew members explored the wreck before rising 75 minutes later. But where was Pritchard? The Coast Guard swept the area, but no one was found, and in the end, the captain ordered the crew not to return to look for him. After all, they had no idea how he disappeared, so going back down there could be even more dangerous. They could lose more people. The Doria has always been considered dangerous and has claimed 15 lives previously. As the years go on, the wreckage continues to get less and less stable. But whether Pritchard was trapped by the ship or died due to equipment failure, no one will ever know, and it just is... no one will ever know. Number 5, Snake Island. The problem with deep diving is that if there is a problem, you can't just rush up to the surface or you might literally explode internally.
decompression sickness. So staying calm is paramount, but it's not always enough. 3 divers decided to take on a 180-meter dive in Snake Wall in the Georgia Strait. One of the men stayed in the shallower area while the other 2 decided to dive as deep as they could. While they were down there, something happened, something went wrong, and while the second diver almost made it to the surface, he too perished as well. They were experienced divers, they wouldn't have been able to go in there if they weren't, so just exactly what happened to the 2 at the bottom still remains a mystery, because it could have been as simple as an equipment failure, but there's no proof. Number 4, they checked no. There is a reason why high-risk activities require you to sign and fill in a waiver or consent form. They ask about your health because you or someone else could be put at risk because of it. This one diver decided to check no on the form when it asked if they had epilepsy. Flash forward to a seizure attack in a pitch black cavern 85 feet below the water. In this story submitted by Reddit user Sharkbite, they noticed one of the diver's lights weren't moving. After heading over to see what was wrong, they noticed that the diver had no regulator in their mouth, which is the breathing apparatus, and their eyes were completely checked out and their teeth were clenched together. They forcibly purged the air into their mouth with the regulator, which moved their cheeks enough to indicate air was going in. That was good enough for them. The rescue diver then grabbed their arm and swam up straight 60 feet to get them to surface, risking the bends. Once to the shore, the rest of the team helped get their gear off, and though in shock, the diver recovered like nothing happened. Thankfully, they were only 10 minutes into the dive, otherwise they would have both ended up sick. The rescue diver was put at risk, shooting up to the surface to save them both, and said they would do it again if need be. And I mean, I would too, but like, boy would I be pissed. Hopefully, this person didn't discover that they have epilepsy below the water. That could be a thing too. But if they knew and didn't say, someone's gonna get a stern talking to. Wow. Number 3, Sanctum. Even the most experienced divers can encounter deadly complications on dives, and to this day no one knows what brought Agnes Maloka down. Agnes was a stunt diver who had a fierce desire for underwater exploration. By age 29, she'd been featured in multiple documentaries and even acted in the movie Sanctum. But while on a dive in the tank caves in Australia, even her expert navigational skills were no match for the sinkholes, caves, and silt. Somehow she became separated from her diving buddy, and silt from the cave walls disrupted her vision. If you breathed too hard, the air bubbles would pop and disturb the ceiling and it would come crashing down. The following day, they found her body 500 meters from the entrance of the cave. Evidence suggests that she remained calm until her last breath, but no one knows what the exact reason was for her struggle. It could have been she ran out of air. Anything could have happened, but either way, she lost her life. Number 2, Plura Caves. Norway's Plura Caves used to be a spot where experienced divers would test their mettle, but ever since this incident, they have been closed indefinitely. In February 2014, several divers prepared to make the long trek to the other side of the cave, but 135 meters down, they lost 2 of their members. One member, Jari, got stuck halfway in a narrow passage, which caused immediate panic. That far down, that's a very dangerous thing. Fellow diver Patrick handed him an extra cylinder to prevent hypercapnia, which is excessive CO2 in the bloodstream, so like hyperventilating, but Jari panicked while switching and he drowned right in front of Patrick's eyes. Can't imagine that. Patrick did everything he could to stay calm and had to keep moving, but behind them, divers Kai and another man named Jari were due for a shock. Jari saw the body of Jari and panicked even though Kai tried to help him, and sadly Jari succumbed to the same fate. With the passage now fully blocked, Kai had to trek 11 hours back the same way he came all the way to the start. 2 months later, Patrick and Kai went back secretly to recover their friends, in which they succeeded, but no one else is allowed in those caves ever since then. Number 1, Dion Dreyer. And last but not least, the tale of Dion Dreyer. If this story doesn't haunt you, I don't know what will. Dion passed away in 1994 when his body was lost 270 meters in Bushman's Hole, South Africa. For 10 years his body remained there, but extreme diver David Shaw decided it was time to bring him home. But the dive went nowhere near as expected. With Shaw's experience in situations like this, there wasn't a doubt in anyone's mind he'd be okay. Shaw assembled a team and made the descent 270 70 meters down to find Dreyer. But when Shaw tried to put the body in a body bag, the skeleton started floating due to the wetsuit Dreyer still wore. At those depths, any panic or disorientation could be deadly, and indeed it was for Shaw. As he wrestled with the body and began his ascent, his light got snagged and he panicked because he already overexerted himself. Dave eventually passed out, and before long Bushman's hole claimed his life as well, but almost poetically, the two bodies floated up to the surface together. Shaw made sure he fulfilled his mission even with his last breath.